Hello folks, and welcome to this, the April 24th, 2016 edition of Decision 2016 Digest, the channel where we bring you the top political, policy, and election headlines of the week in 15 minutes or less. I'm your host, Scott Jones. This is a special edition, something a little different with this episode. I'm going to give you a quick update on the presidential election. Then I want to talk about President Obama's visit this week to the UK and the controversy over his comments on the UK remaining in the European Union and why, if at all, we should care. I'm really excited to welcome a special guest to discuss the whole Obama-EU kerfuffle. Stay with us because in a few short minutes, National Review columnist and anchor panelist of the award-winning PBS Public Affairs TV show, The McLaughlin Group, Tom Rogan will join us from Washington to talk about it all, so stay with us. But first, a quick update on the 2016 presidential race. On the GOP side, the three amigos continue to slug it out on the campaign trail, with Donald Trump securing a commanding win in his home state of New York last Tuesday. Texas Senator Ted Cruz continues in his strong ground game of trying to pick off individual delegates around the country, leading Trump to complain that the GOP primary process is quote-unquote rigged. It is all but settled that Cruz now has no path to get to the 1,237 delegates needed to win the GOP nomination before their party convention this summer. Most states in this coming Tuesday's group of primaries, which include Pennsylvania, other Northeast states, seem to favor Trump, which could significantly extend his delegate lead over Cruz and move him closer to the 1,237 needed to get the nod. Kasich continues hanging on in the hopes that a contested convention could break his way. Definitely a long shot by any measure. It continues to remain interesting, and we will keep you posted on it all right here on Decision 2016 Digest. Now on to the Democrats. Despite a string of smaller state wins for avowed socialist Senator Vermont's Bernie Sanders, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is within a primary or two of clinching the Democratic nomination for president. As we have reported, the only thing that stands in her way is the outcome of the FBI investigation on her homebrew server and mishandling of top-secret national security documents while at state. This should be resolved one way or another before their convention this summer. Sanders continues to be a nuisance to her progress in the race in that he continues to draw huge crowds and is raising big money. Clearly, like the GOP voters, they are not entirely happy with the establishment's choice of Hillary Clinton on the Dem side. This race continues with its own twists and turns. Again, we will keep you up to date right here on Decision 2016 Digest. Okay, that's the quick report on the 2016 presidential race. Now on to our special edition topic, Obama's visit to the UK and the controversy over his comments on the UK's European Union referendum known as Brexit, which is a contraction for Britain's exit from the EU. UK voters will be deciding whether to stay part of the European Union, and it's a highly divisive issue amongst the populace in the United Kingdom. At a joint press conference on Friday with UK Prime Minister David Cameron, President Obama inserted himself into the debate in what many consider inappropriate and condescending remarks on the issue. In fact, this picture I created substantially captures the public sentiment in the UK. Maybe you should shut your cake hole, Mr. President. The question I wanted to answer for you, our viewers, is this important to the U.S., and why should we even care about it? I've asked a frequent guest on my radio show to join us with some answers. He is my go-to guy on international affairs, and I admire him immensely. Stand by while we rewire, and National Review columnist and McLaughlin Group's Tom Rogan will join us from Washington. Back in a few seconds with Tom. And we're back. I told you it'd only take a second or two. Joining me now from his hideout near our nation's capital is somebody I admire immensely. He's a frequent guest on my radio show. His intellect and insights and perspectives on all things international affairs, he's my go-to guy. He is columnist for National Review Online, the Daily Telegraph, and an anchor panelist in the award-winning PBS program, the McLaughlin Group. In fact, he was on my TV just this morning. I watched it all. Tom Rogan, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I love having you, as you know, and we've had great fun, and our listeners love you on the radio show. I told everybody what we're talking about here. You know, generally we cover the presidential election on this channel, but I felt like this whole EU, President Obama weighing in on them staying in the EU and the UK was important and timely because of the recent trip. And I wanted to start out, because you're the international affairs brain, not me. Why should America care about it? And I understand why the UK is upset about President Obama weighing in, but is it something that we as U.S. citizens should really care about? And if so, why?
Well, look, I think from the American point of view, there are two divergent interests about whether the UK should stay in the EU. One hand is President Obama, and to be honest, I have some sympathy for it. It's that the United Kingdom, being part of the EU, allows the UK with some more conservative politics, very much more pro-American standpoints on a whole range of issues, much of which don't actually get into the news, but matter in terms of international diplomacy and cooperation. That if the UK remains in the EU, it can provide influence in American favor. The other side suggests that, well, the EU is a lost hope, that the EU is too corrupt, it's too freewheeling in its dealings with US enemies or adversaries or competitors, and that the United Kingdom separating from the EU would allow the US to benefit from all of those relationships with the UK, both in terms of trade, but also international diplomacy, without any of the bureaucratic impediments of the European Union. I think the reason why the president's comments matter to Americans is that when you're dealing with an ally, it becomes very important that you have a leader who speaks in a way that doesn't alienate, in this, as the president has in this case, 50% essentially of the British population. And it's quite notable. And I would ask that your viewers, Scott, read around this and think about this, is that for a long time, the liberal media in the United States liked to deride President Bush as the sort of person who everyone hated on the international scene. And while President Obama is popular, his popularity has declined steadily because of arrogant comments like this that, quite frankly, earn quite a lot of disrespect, and understandably so, from American partners abroad.
Well, Tom, he went over there, and I watched his press conference with Prime Minister David Cameron, and it seemed to be rocking along pretty well as far as those type of things go. But then there was one comment that he made, and as I understand it from all reports, President Obama is really popular in the UK as a person, and there was one comment toward the end of the presser about how it almost seemed kind of a unique combination of condescending and almost threatening about how if the UK were to drop out of the EU, that somehow you would be, and this is my characterization, a second-class ally instead of a first-class ally, and would lose some clout on the world stage, almost preaching to the UK people. And I know he prefaced it by David Cameron's his friend and he was there to help, but it didn't seem like it really helped.
No, I don't think it did. And I think, I've been watching some of the British media coverage over the weekend, and there has been a lot of negative criticism about it, including from people who are very strong, overt supporters of the president, because of the tone, because it comes across in that way that I think quite a lot of American conservatives, such as ourselves, Scott, have worried about, in the sense that the president gives this idea of really imbued arrogance in how he delivers things, that anyone else who disagrees is, they're silly, and that he's the visionary. And people saw that. I think a lot of Britons saw that for the first time. And again, that matters, and the problem is, I think that arrogance is not reflected simply in terms of alienating people by a poor choice of words, and the preaching from the mountaintop. It's the preaching and the sense of self-delusion about the nature of the world that the president pervades in terms of his foreign policy, whether that be Syria with the Russians or the South China Sea, whatever you want. But, look, there is an issue here. Arrogance is not good in leadership. You want confident leadership, you want deliberate leadership, but you also want leadership that treads that line between, that is constructive, that it forges consensus rather than alienation.
Well, for our viewers' benefit, Tom is a naturalized U.S. citizen, and
actually natural born. I actually read it. People could disagree with me, but because my dad was in the State Department, I put myself under the natural born one. But that's the great debate. Great. That'll be a debate for another day.
That's right. But in any event, despite the British accent, he's ours, and their loss is our gain, as it were. And we're glad to have you here. But all that being said and done, do you think that the American government, for sure, but certainly I think the argument in the UK is it's better to stay in the EU, but is it going to be ultimately better for the United States if the UK stays in or gets out? I mean, what is your feeling on that? And then finally, where do you think it's going to end up in the referendum over in the UK?
Yeah, so I tend to come down on the side that it's better for the United States. I think if I was in Britain and I was voting as a British voter, look, when I came over here, my mother's British, I feel you have to ultimately, especially if you're doing sort of national security things, which I do, you have to have one abiding allegiance, and that is to the United States for me. So I look at it from the American example. Were that American element of my citizenship not there, I would be very much in favor of leaving if I was in the UK. But from the American point of view, I think because of that level of influence that the UK gives the United States with France, with Germany, with the relationships of the European Union, and this is the critical point, with actors like Russia and Iran in the South China Sea, because of the again, preference to more conservative, less government bureaucracy, that I think makes it positive for the United States that we have the United Kingdom in that position to be able to influence. And I do think my one hedge on that is that I think the European project is very close to death, and I think that's a good thing. In the idea that this centralized bureaucracy of unaccountable liberal judges and politicians trying to destroy the notion of state sovereignty, I think, which is very important to, obviously, Americans, I think that's gone. Now, essentially, it's going to move towards more of a free trading bloc and political cooperation on the international scene.
See, guys, see how much more eloquent he is than I am?
It's only the accent, though.
And he gets all the girls because of the accent. They all love it. But I'll tell you, you were much more eloquent than I, Tom. My tagline for the trip over there was, Obama bombs London worse than the Luftwaffe in World War II.
All right, well, I can, I think that is I will give you then a... What do you know? I have a joke about the RAF from an RAF pilot I knew and the Second World War, which goes to the other side. But I will mention that in person. We can have it over a drink. It might upset.
I'd love that. I'd love that. Tom, it's always a pleasure to have you on. I wanted to bring your insights to this channel that I'm doing. It's called Decision 2016 Digest, where we're covering all of the election news for the presidential election. But because of this, we've done this special edition on this because I think the decisions and the things that Obama is doing right now is going to obviously affect the future president, and rightfully so. And of course, UK is our strongest European ally. So I, like you, think it's probably good to have the UK and our cousins over there in the driver's seat versus what I've seen on the European continent, because there's a big mess there.
Yeah, well, no, and I think you're right. And this is a fantastic setup you've got here going, and it's great to be, using it visually. Because honestly, Scott, I think one of the great advantages that you have is that when people come to you, they know they're getting an unfiltered point of view, as in terms of video and on radio, but also with that warmth of, to you, you do have that kind of warmth of the American heartland that, frankly, you don't see enough in the major cities.
You're just saying you tolerate my Texas accent.
Well, let me put it this way: and your viewers can judge whether they think I'm telling the truth. One of the great identifiers is why I always felt more comfortable as an American is that when we would go to barbecues in London with my dad, he would be complaining because the people there would be shrimp and he had to dress up and it was sipping white wine. And when we'd go to family barbecues over here or friends with my dad's over here, as kids, we loved it because there would just be well-cooked meats. And as we got older, a lot of alcoholic beverages and a more relaxed attitude, let us say, to having fun for the sake of having fun rather than having fun for the sake of pretension and the pursuit of the perception of having fun.
Well, equally, there are things I love about the UK, as you know. Tom, you've become such a great friend, and I can't say enough how much I admire your work, and I really appreciate you taking time on a Sunday to talk with us about this. Everybody, I'm going to put in the description below, you'll have Tom's Twitter information and his website, and all of that will be down in the description, so I hope you'll follow him. He's a great guy. Tom, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Scott. Good to see you, my friend.
Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed and appreciated Tom taking the time to weigh in. Again, he is one of the best in the field in my book. My sincere thanks for Tom joining us, and I put all of his social media and info in the description below. That's it for this special edition of Decision 2016 Digest. If you like what we're doing here, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know you appreciate the effort we're making to bring you the very latest in election news. As a hookup for our viewers, if you like listening to books instead of reading them, hit the special link in the description below and get your first month free and your first book download free from audible.com. Free to try with no further obligation. 2016 is an important election with wide-ranging effects on the future of our country. Whatever you do, stay informed, get involved, because your country needs you, folks. We'll do our part to help, and we'll see you next time right here on Decision 2016 Digest.